All right, we're here for another Smith Sense podcast, and I'm with my business partner and friend, Gary Young, to discuss a topic that I think is very interesting. It's something that you and I have come up in conversations with you and I think at least half a dozen times over the last year and a half, with regard to sales and leadership and not being brainwashed and all kinds of other stuff. But the idea is the idea of something you and I are calling frame. And this term is used by other people, I think, in the same respect, but we'll go through what it really means and why it's really important. But I want to start with one main point with it, which is an old mentor of mine, Mark Ford. And Mark said, mostly I don't really care about most of these things, but I really want people who have a point of view. Now, when he first told me that, it was probably a decade ago at this point. I was like, yeah, I get it. I can understand why that's important, but I really, over time, I just understand how right he was, like how rare it is that you have someone with a point of view. And I'm introducing that antidote with the idea of frame, because I think that that's fundamentally what having a strong frame really is that you've got a point of view on the world, at least on parts of it.
Yeah.
And so what are the advantages of frame? Like, what do you think? Why does frame matter?
Why don't we start with what frame is, right?
Okay.
Frame is part worldview, part identity, part posture, right? It's like one of those things that it's hard to define, but it's not that hard to explain, right? So I don't have a super pithy way to say what frame is, but frame is where you're coming at, from what position you're coming at the world from, right? And so some like hypothetical examples, different frames, right? So when the Pope walks into a room full of the faithful, he's got one frame, right? And when somebody is walking into the prison cafeteria or something, they have a totally different frame on their first day in prison, right? And those are way more environmental, because you could have a really strong frame in situations where most people wouldn't, right? And that's really the powerful and portable aspects of it. But it gives you a sense of like, this is who I am and this is my posture towards the world.
Right. And I think in our prior discussions about this, one of the key things we talk about is that it just seems there's a deep lacking of frame most people have. They operate in most things without that at all, or at least a version of it that's so paper thin. It's like it could be bowled over with a strong gust.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think it's one of those things that like most people haven't really thought about the situation that they're currently in before they're in it, right? Which makes it hard to have a frame. And then they don't think about what they want, what their desired outcome is, right? And if those are two of the sort of pretty easy ways to have some sense of frame, where it's just like, okay, I'm going into this situation, I'm going into this first date, what is my posture towards this? What do I want out of the next hour, right? Or I'm going into the sales call, what do I want? What are my objectives?
Right. Someone with a strong frame, they look to the outside as someone who is confident.
Yep.
Not necessarily, there's no like arrogance, there's no boastfulness, there's none of that. It's just like there's a sense of, there's a sense of confidence.
Yeah. So and being unshakable.
Right. And I think a lot of people look at that confidence and they go, well, that's so they think that they think that the way to they see that as useful. They see like that confidence as strength. And so people often like will kind of build up a fake version of that, thinking that that's the answer to like the key is that they're just confident about stuff. But really a good frame comes from almost like an intellectual underpinning of things. Like it's like the surface that you might see might come off as like calm confidence, but like layers deep, it's because like I'm confident because of this, because of that, because I'm certain about this. I know how I feel about that. I know that this is good and that's bad. And I'm not relying on other parties in order to keep that frame together. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
People like, so I know we've talked, I think, at least once or twice about this guy, that Rene Girard,
Mm-hmm.
and the whole mimetic theory thing.
Yep. Yep.
Can you explain that?
Uh, yeah. So Rene Girard's mimetic theory is basically that most of history and most of human conflict can be explained by people wanting effectively the same things and just copying one another, right? And it makes resources very scarce if everyone wants exactly the same thing. And his argument is there's a lot to it, and I'm not definitely not an expert, but like that people are social life is mimicry, basically.
Right. So, so fundamentally, the default, if not the primary, certainly the default way that humans ascribe value to things, where they determine what truth is, what's good or bad, they look to the people around them for what they think. And then if they, based upon what they think, they adjust what they think. They adjust their point of view to it. And I think so. You can see where I'm going with this mimetic theory. How it really intersects with frame, and how frame can be an incredibly powerful, persuasive tool if it's built on something real. So you have to assume that it's definitely true, and you can see this. Most people don't have really strong beliefs about anything, or as Mark Ford said, they don't have a strong point of view about anything.
No,
instead they're gauging the temperature of the room constantly, trying to go, is this good or is that good? And trying to make adjustments along the way, which is why you see these pack mentalities, and why the basic political ideologies in the United States are Republican and Democrat. Why it's so, how can among 330 million people basically we have fundamentally 2 points of view? Like, how's that even possible?
Yeah,
it's impossible in a world where we copy one another. And it's dangerous, because you will notice in yourself this desire to be pulled toward other people. You can rewire your whole sense of what's valuable if you're around people who don't value what you do at all. Instead they value other things. You can switch to that.
Yep. And
that strength of point of view really is what frame is about. And I think let's talk about frame as it applies to sales, because I think this is probably where it's come up, where we've seen it come up, right, time after time again.
Yeah. So, a lot of salespeople, it's very easy for them to lose confidence in themselves or in the product they're selling, and based on, sales often, the emotional state of a salesperson is often this sine wave, right? And vacillating between almost irrational euphoria and irrational despair. Yeah, exactly. And that comes from not having this strong internalized sense of the thing that you are selling is valuable, and is valuable for this person, right, that you're talking to. And sometimes you go into calls and turns out that the thing you have isn't actually valuable for them, right? And that's okay. In
which case, what do you do if you have strong frame and that's true?
This isn't the right thing for you.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. Maybe I know something that might be more appropriate, and I'll introduce you to them.
Right. Or maybe at some point in the future this might make sense, in which case I'd love to talk, but clearly not right now.
Exactly. And so if you go into it and you don't have an independent belief that the thing you're selling is valuable, you're never going to be very good at selling anything, right? And it's easy. The is super. What I've always found super curious is the someone who doesn't, this potential customer who doesn't really know anything about your product, right, is often going to initially tell you, oh, that's just not for me. And salespeople a lot of times are just like, oh, okay, yeah, I guess not. And that's weird, because they don't know shit about what you're selling yet, and you've accepted their frame, right? And that,
right,
then you don't have to, yeah.
It's a fundamental flaw. Maybe it's overall evolutionary advantage, this mimetic tendency. maybe it's good for evolution on the whole, but it seems like a fundamental flaw in humans that if we are that we look so much to others for how we should feel about everything about ourselves and our point of view. I mean, everything, what we value, everything. And that if we encounter, if we are, even when there's something we have strong knowledge on, if we encounter somebody who just doesn't understand what we're talking about, and so they are confident because there's a misunderstanding.
Yep.
Then we see that confidence and we immediately go, well, they're probably right. There probably really is no way you can help them.
Yep.
And so that's what salespeople just get bowled over. And then it reinforces, then they start to adopt over time more and more of this attitude with more people who had stronger, uninformed frames. They start to adopt that as their own. It's like, maybe what I have isn't very good. Yep. You start off really believing in what you do and then end up thinking that you can't solve a problem no matter what, thinking that the competition is better all the time.
Yep.
And it's this absurd thing. It happens all the time. And I think it's just it's a human tendency. And I think one of the ways that salespeople can combat it is that, like a good prosecutor, almost you build the case in advance of the sales call, and you do your research, you know the facts, and you understand, you understand your product well, you understand their situation as well as you can before you get in the sales call with them, and you build a case. And so you have confidence about your frame going into it. And when they say, well, this doesn't sound like it's for me. And you go, well, you could totally be right, because this isn't right for everybody. But do you mind if I ask you a question? Yep. And then ask them a question that just opens up, helps you understand where there might be a misunderstanding.
Yep. Exactly.
And if with that calm confidence, asking that question, admitting that it's quite possible we can't help them, but it has worked for a lot of other people, then they start to see the strength of your own frame. Mm-hmm. And ultimately, they start to see the weakness of their own, because they don't have enough information. They don't know enough to have a strong frame. And ultimately, by making it clear to the parties involved in the conversation that one has a stronger frame than the other, then people naturally move over to your side. Mm-hmm. It's not even, you don't have to convince anyone of anything. You just have to show them what you've got and show them what they've got.
Yep. Well, I think too, the preparation beforehand and like understanding, or at least having a working theory of where they're at, right? What you have, right? And those things, like arming yourself with the knowledge before you get on that call. It's like, it's knowledge that's good to have, but in reality, the bigger benefit is the confidence and the frame. Like, look, like, hey, two of us, you may disagree. Did you do any of your homework? No, you didn't do any of your fucking homework. I did all my fucking homework. Let's talk about this, because I actually have done this before. And maybe we should think about it a little bit together.
Exactly. And like knowing like that reminding yourself that you know what you're talking about, showing up for the call prepared, showing having some time, not being rushed, not being late, not doing it in a place where you're not prepared. All of that just makes it so that you weaken yourself unnaturally to be bowled over by somebody who has strong confidence. And it's a strong sense of frame. But again, you can have frame because you think you know something that you don't understand. And that's often what it is. I mean, most of the time where you encounter somebody where they're like at loggerheads on something, it's because they're talking about different things.
People think, right, that people that are good at sales, right? So it's like, if you have a kid who's like 17, 18 years old, that is like really extroverted, gregarious, can talk to anybody, right? But you should go into sales. It's like, well, almost all of the really good salespeople I've ever met are way more disagreeable than most natural extroverts are, right?
And I would say just introverted more. They tend to be more introverted. A lot of that, I think, is because they are naturally not looking to the outside world. Like they have a little advantage, I guess, in not being consumed by them.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you think about it, right, your extrovert, your natural extrovert, right, is going to seem like initially they have a stronger frame, but in reality, they're feeding off other people, and you have to, it's quite difficult to feed off other people if you're publicly just disagreeing with them and arguing with them, right? So
Right.
it's like,
It is a vehicle of influence, and you are influenced by it. If you find yourself being like really falling for somebody, like really falling, like believing what they're saying, or changing your views on something, or just really liking them, even like you'll notice that if you put it in this context of frame, it will make a ton of sense to you. You know that you're basically, yours is weaker, so you're adopting theirs.
yep.
And ultimately, you'll have theirs. You'll walk around with their frame, their view, belief of the world, and you'll assume it was yours to begin with, because people just totally, when faced with a strong frame, we adopt it. We don't fight it.
Yep.
And so I think so. There's a lot of advantage in sales. I think it's pretty clear as a tool of influence. But there's lots of other ways that it impacts your life, right? There's other ways that you can use it. So, what are some ways that you were worthy of sharing here?
Plenty that are worthy of sharing, but perhaps not wise to share.
You can talk about dating if that's what you want to talk about, since some people are in the.
Well, I know. Well, I don't. I think.
Don't have to.
I think when it comes to frame, right? It's you are presenting in a subtle way that is just sort of like water, like your fish swimming in water. What your worldview is, your identity is, what your life is like, right? To some extent. And so, one of the things with, say, dating, for example, right, is like you're on a date, and you and the other person are evaluating, like, okay, do I like this person? Can I talk to them? Everything else. But the other thing that you're really looking at is like, is this person someone that will fit into my world, or do I want
I have to fit into theirs?
Yeah, or do I want to fit into theirs, or have to fit into theirs, right? And it's interesting because like there's a lot of lonely guys out there that are like, I got to figure out exactly the right thing to say, and like, what do I do? And then like the standard advice is like, be yourself. Problem is most people are like mimetic creatures, and they should not be themselves because they're boring. Yep. And so basically it's like, well, if you do interesting things that you care about, and then you just tell people what those interesting things are, that's like 80% of dating, right? And so that's like an example of your frames. Like your frame is made up of all sorts of things, right? Like at its cheapest, your frame could be like you standing in front of a mirror telling yourself affirmations, right? Which is one approach. Might work, might not. But then in reality, your frame is like remembering your victories, the things that you survived, the things that and just not forgetting those, and being willing, if somebody disagrees, like, well, like, I have this different lived experience, and I'll tell you about it. And most of the time, they will all you have to do is you don't even fight it head on. You say, oh, that's interesting because I had a different experience. Then you just tell them it, and then by the end of it, whatever that worldview is, you've just implanted it in their mind, right?
Right. Well, and also I think when you have two people that have encountered each other that have strong frames, you'll find that those people, especially if they are legitimately strong frames, like they have deep roots, they don't have any problem with each other. It's surprising. They can differ on things so fundamentally, but they are totally fine with it does not threaten them in any way that the other person thinks something different, because it doesn't hurt me. Like I'm confident in what this is. So it doesn't bother me. And so you can find people that are very disagreeable and disagree on a lot who can get along fantastically well, because they both have strong frames. It's when you encounter like a stronger and a weaker frame where you tend to find more of that conflict, because it's like you're now, what you're saying, really could really affect if someone's saying something that you disagree with, but your frame is built out of sand, then it feels like every time they open their mouth, it's washing it away and making you weaker. And it is making you weaker. And eventually it'll get subsumed by a stronger frame. If you stay with it, it will, because you just can't deny it.
Yeah.
But so I think when you talk about even the reminding yourself of, who you are, where you stand, I think that just like we talked about, that exercise of prep before a sales meeting, it's that same kind of thing. It's naturally human. It's a human thing that you can lose frame, especially if you're going into an unusual scenario or, a high stakes scenario. I think a really important sale. That's why that prep, having your stuff together, like having done your homework, having done the math, having lots of examples that you could present the person you're selling to with, proving, you could prove it. Think of it, get a good prosecutor going into court to prove something. Then it helps get your mind in the right frame it needs to be. And if you don't do those things, then it's easy to fall out of it. Over time, some things, like root things, you can fully incorporate and can be habitual. And I think usually those things are like at the moral philosophy level, And a lot of people actually, I feel like, don't have strong moral philosophy either. And so it makes it really, really hard. If you don't even have those fundamental roots about what's good, you don't know really what's good. Mimetic theory is going to just drive you mad. You'll be chasing shiny objects everywhere you go.
Yeah. One, it's easy too, because like most of the time with folks that have most of the time you don't have really strong moral beliefs without a strong frame, right? So if you don't have one of your own, you will end up having one. And that can be good, can be bad, depending on how old you are and everything else. But like, it's easy to just sort of get subsumed by.
Right. And I think we're in a state of mania in the United States right now, from a political standpoint, from just division. And it seems like people are subsumed.
Yeah.
Because there are a couple of frames, and it's so easy to get. I mean, if you can see these performative examples of that people are adopting and being compliant with certain frames of thinking, and the rare independent thinker it's with the rare. And I think I posted something on Twitter the other day. There was and I'm sure you saw this picture of this girl as a soccer team, and all her person on our team, they're all kneeling for the national anthem, and she is standing. And then they show a split screen, basically a guy at a Nazi rally where everyone's doing the Sieg Heil thing, and this other one guy's got his arms crossed, like
nope.
And so what I was saying is, I said, it's so rare. People don't understand the kind of courage it takes to be that one person who's saying, no, I'm not going to do it. Just because everyone else is doing it, I'm not going to do it. Because my frame is strong enough. I know this isn't right. And I would say that applies to Kaepernick too. When everybody gave him a bunch of crap, when he was kneeling and no one else would do it. Like, that takes courage. Like, whether you agree with it or not, you got to respect anyone who can stand outside of the crowd with a strong frame. I think those are two public examples we saw of it recently.
Yeah, very much so. To kneel or not to kneel. And, at different points in time, it requires courage.
Exactly. But if you look to the crowd and everyone else is doing it, and you go, well, this is a good idea, then you know that you have a weak frame.
Yeah. Well, and the thing is, right, the way to have a strong frame, one way to have a strong frame, right, is because the part that gets you is when you're just not even thinking about it and you just do it, right? And it's just like, well, wait a second, why on earth am I doing this, right? And if you can kind of interrupt yourself from just following the mob, then and say, is this something that I think I should do or not do? Then that's a path to it, right? Because like half the battle is noticing.
Right, and I think the more I also think that you really gotta go to some roots. We have talked about moral philosophy just briefly, and I think that if you have your own personal moral philosophy, then while you will encounter situations that are unexpected, there will be something inside you that'll be like, this doesn't feel right. I can't even articulate it, but this is one of those, this is not good what's happening right now.
Yep.
So you kind of, that inner voice starts to speak up, but I don't think it's there unless you've really figured out your own moral philosophy. And I guess just at the sake of going down this road just a little bit, it's worth describing. There's like three basic views of moral philosophy. There's three fundamental views on it. And one is that, it's a utilitarian view, which is that the outcome is what matters. So it's not that the act itself, the action isn't necessarily good or bad, like kneeling or not kneeling. One is not innately good.
Yeah.
The outcome, the result. So that's a utilitarian view. So it's like the end justifies the means. And that's a workable moral philosophy. Honestly, I think you can get yourself twisted into knots with that utilitarian approach, but it can work. You also have this, that it's the action that matters. So the good is not in the outcome, the good is in the action. So the good is it's like thou shalt not kill. I mean, all religions are founded on this. Here are the rules, engage in these rules, and it's, sometimes like thou shalt not kill, is to true believers would be like, it's always all the time. It's turn the other cheek and get smacked. I mean, that's what Jesus would do. So it's in the action. The good is in the action.
Mm-hmm.
So there's the good is in the action. There's the good that's in the outcome. And then there's the good that is in the intent. Okay. Mm-hmm. So it has it's a virtue-based moral philosophy. Instead, it's like, it doesn't matter what I do necessarily, and it doesn't necessarily matter what the outcome is. So the action is not fixed. The actions is not fixed. The outcome's not fixed. But the part that's fixed, the good part, is the part of the why I'm doing what I'm doing, why I'm trying to do what I'm doing. So, it's like, lying, could be bad, just in general, lying I think is, not good. But if you got Anne Frank in the attic,
yeah,
and Nazi patrol is going on, then I think lying is definitely good. And so you could say that's a utilitarian approach to it, but I think also the value of preserving the human life, it could be, it's the intent of it. It's as long as you are staying true to those virtues, which you have deemed they are the good. So conducting yourself from this is where the good is, then it becomes a lot easier. Mm-hmm. But I think a lot of people, we don't teach these basic moral philosophies. So most people operate on a pseudo utilitarian basis.
When it's useful for them.
When it works for them. But it leaves people desperately, I think, unhappy because they don't even feel good about what they're doing necessarily. You know what I mean? Like I'm a virtue-based guy. I believe in that approach. So I think the only way you can find happiness, because you can't control the outcome. You can't control the outcome, and deeds themselves are not necessarily good. So
yeah,
people are unhappy without it. But if you build from that ground up, and then so how you're going to conduct yourself, the type of human you want to be in the world, you can recognize when you're falling short of it, and you can make adjustments, and you will fall short of it. But then, then in every other activity you're engaging in life, you do these, you basically build the foundations around it so that your frame becomes very, very strong over time, and people become way less bothered by anybody. People naturally want to come to your side. They follow you places. I mean, it just sort of happens as you build up your frame, and sales becomes really easy because, if something's right for your customer, they come to see it. Mm-hmm. And the fact that if it's not right for them, the last thing you want them to do is to buy it, then that they feel that out very quickly. And it makes them somehow more interested in your product to begin with.
Yeah. Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, it's like, the virtue-based, the three different moral approaches, right? And the thing is too, it's like if you've got any friends that follow really strict diets, right? At first, when they start doing the diet, everyone's like, well, I know you said you're a vegetarian, but this bacon's really good. Do you want some? And then eventually, right, if they have a pretty strong frame, you don't even ask them anymore. If they want meat, you're like, oh, you're coming over? Okay, I'll get some veggie burgers or whatever. And it's a sort of a superficial example, but it is like an example of a frame over time, right? Or somebody who doesn't drink, right? And you don't there's like,
There's like, Craig Ballantyne's rules thing. Like it doesn't, you got to have these rules for what you will do and what you won't do. And I mean, while those are, sort of a layer on, certainly on top of different things for the most part, beyond like the moral virtues, but they make it a lot easier to operate in life. And they do persuade people. Like when you have that strength of like, no, I don't do that. You're like, "Wait, ever drink?
yeah,
No, I don't drink.
I don't drink.
It's weird. What's wrong with you? Like people don't even, it doesn't even make sense to people when you encounter somebody who is firm in one way or the other.
Yeah. Well, and then there's a brief frame battle. Well, what do you mean you don't do that? It's like, no, I don't. So.
Right. Especially when they're like, well, it's just not for me. And they're not trying to convince you.
No, exactly.
Because again, they are trying to sell you. You're certain in your frame, you don't feel the need to sell anyone else on it. And that automatically sells people on it, strangely enough.
Exactly. Well, why don't you drink anymore? Yeah.
Right.
And then it's like, well, I just, I don't like it. Well, there's gotta be some other, and like all those sorts of things like that. It's an example of frame. Right. And like the thing is, right, every January, there's like millions and millions of Americans, right, that come up with a list of rules for themselves when it comes to eating, for example, or exercise.
Right.
But in reality, like, why don't people have moral rules for their the health of their moral code, right? And they're not that. I mean, and you could just, I think a lot of people who are religious have this in pretty like healthy amounts, right? Like there's certain things I won't do. There's other things I will do. Like, but having your own personal 5, 10, 15 commandments for your life. Like the other thing that Craig, I remember I heard about from him, right? It was like the Kekich credos or something like that. And those are a really good example of like frame. I mean, there's just so many of them. How the hell are you going to remember them all? But like you take a couple of them that really matter. Right.
And I bet you if you looked at them, you'd find that there are common moral codes essentially. There's like 3 that probably branch to the 90 or whatever, credos he's got.
Yep.
But but you can't, those higher level rules all become strong when you have something deeper. And I think the thing about those New Year's resolutions is always that, you're thinking of them at the start of the new year anyway. So like you just are trying on some new clothes. You're just trying on a new frame, and it's naturally going to be incredibly weak to begin with. Yeah. And the more rooted in something bigger could be like, like if you believe, for instance, that meat was something that's bad for you, and then you start, or that, unhealthy for whatever reason. And then you really started to spend time meditating on how bad it was for animals and all of that. And you went to some slaughterhouses and saw it done. And you just, it would build this sort of intellectual and emotional underpinning that would make you be like, I don't want any part of that. I don't want anything to do with that. You go the Richard Gere route and you go full Buddhist or something,
Yeah. Well, most people read one Huffington Post article to declare themselves a vegetarian, and 2 weeks later they're having a bacon, egg, and cheese sandwich,
right. Exactly. And then a month later they'll be vegan because that's the trend of the day. And then they'll start, they'll become a yoga teacher, and then they'll become a stoic because those are the popular trends.
Yeah. Well, the thing is too, it's like, it's the one way to measure a frame is like, what have they sacrificed for that, to take that position? Right. And like, and if your position costs you nothing, your position is not particularly strong. But like if you've, half the battle is figuring out what's the price you're willing to pay and paying it. And if you've paid it, your frame is quite strong, right? Because you've sacrificed. Right. Most people don't sacrifice anything.
Right. Well, and I think that because people like to keep their options open, and they feel like it's enhanced their freedom. And I think so. Like, you and I not long ago had a conversation about the new wave of relationships, the polyamorous. The new thing. The hot new thing. All the kids are doing it. we talked about it. I think we both share the same perspective on it, which is that like, it's just an awful, awful mistake. Just unbelievably bad. It's no way one in a disaster. I know one person who's gone on for a long time without disaster. One. But I mean, I still think it's just, you don't know, there's a fuse on it. You just don't know when the fuse is going to blow. And I think ultimately, but this goes to mostly in my mind to the sacrifice standpoint. Like, you honor a relationship by foregoing others as part of the relationship.
Yep.
That's this, and of course, again, if you're virtue-based moral philosophy, like I have, then it's like how I honoring things is where the magic in life comes from. So like, that's part of the, virtue ethic. So I see value in it anyway, but I mean, I think that if you keep your options open and you're like, yeah, I mean, I'm committed. She's my girlfriend, but we'll just play it by ear. Then I think all you do is you diminish the value of that relationship, and you basically make it open so that you basically make the whole relationship, your point of view about it, but also your partner's very fragile because your commitment to it isn't there. What you're willing to give up isn't there.
Yeah, no, exactly. I mean, I think in a lot of ways we're defined by the things that we sacrifice. Not the things we get, not the things we get, not the things we earn, not the things that are given to us, but the things that we sacrifice. Right.
That's wisdom of the sands.
Yeah. Well, yeah, this is a long tradition. I mean, like when I was growing up, right, we were Eastern Orthodox, we were Greek Orthodox. I never ate meat on Fridays until I was like 18 in college and forgot. Right, small thing, right? Like still, but it was just like you gave up meat for one day, which is like nothing. But still, it is a thing that unites people in this shared sense of sacrifice and the shared sense of like, like it's a fast, right? And like there's a reason why literally every long-standing religious tradition has fasts, right? Like that there's something in that.
Well, it reinforces the larger frame of the moral philosophy of the religion.
Mm-hmm.
The sacrifices you make to it that seem maybe trivial, like one you don't eat meat on one day a week or whatever that is. Is it one day a week?
Just I mean, and then during Lent, right? Okay. But all year round, no meat on Fridays. That was
okay. Yeah. Well, I mean, so like every week you're reminded of a sacrifice you're making that basically helps strengthen the foundation of the other ideas around that the philosophy, the moral philosophy of religion.
Yeah. So, that's why, like, hey, one of the 10 commandments that nobody is like, you're not going to worship false idols. You can't be polyamorous in your faith. Right. You can't, hey, I know you really wanted to worship that pagan river god, so that the floods came at the right level, but sorry, you're stuck with me. You're stuck with Yahweh. Good luck.
Yep.
Right. Or you're not. And so that's like if you can put yourself in a position, which is, this is sort of an interesting thought. It's like, could one strengthen their frame by purposefully sacrificing things in advance of when that frame is necessary? Perhaps.
I think so. It's almost like it does seem to be, as we're talking about it, the mental and physical energy devoted to something devoted to something in and of itself seems to strengthen it, whether it be the prep in advance of a sales call.
It works both ways though. Sitting there and getting in your own head and being like, this thing sucks, this is terrible, I'm never gonna be able to sell it, our competition is way too strong. That strengthens it too, the wrong way.
It's not just the ritual, it has to be the right ritual.
Yeah. You can really basically give yourself a bulletproof frame that's the wrong direction, by doing rituals that diminish it or give you a different frame, right? Because it's a frame that I have this piece of shit thing that I'm selling. That's a frame.
And I hope they don't see it. I'm just going to try and, hopefully.
I'm a shuck and jive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, would you say would it be fair to say that your life is at its root fundamentally defined by the frames that you walk around with or don't walk around with? Would it be?
I'd say the things you get or don't get are very much defined by the frames you walk around with and the ones you don't. But I don't think it's a crazy leap.
So we're working on this basic idea that's sort of related, but not exactly this. That is that people encounter things that they are unsuccessful with. Fundamentally, it's like there's people have a map of the way a situation works. Like their belief in people who are like fixed pie people. Believe that this is this big and the way that I give it. It's like it's a way.
Finite game
works. Yeah, exactly. So that's like one way, and you imagine that a certain scenario works, and then on the other side, then you go, okay, so then how does the world work, and then how do I successfully interact in it? Then like where do I fit in that? So if I believe it's a fixed buy game, then I need to bolster my negotiating strategies to be able and understand, have an information advantage or something like that, so that I can win this fixed pie game.
Yeah.
Right. So I don't have the right words for it yet, but I think like there's the map and the strategy, something like that, So you have the map and the strategy. And I think that fundamentally, if you don't have where people don't get what they want to get out of whatever situation they're in, it's because one of those is wrong, sometimes both, but usually just one of them. They just a basic assumption they're making, in terms of the way that what the map is, or they're using their own strategy. And in a way, I guess that is this, it's probably the same thing as frame in a way, but I don't know.
So like, I think, it depends on what you're doing, right? So like, if I'm a colonel who's looking at the president of this third world country and I'm thinking about taking it, right? It's a hell of a lot better for my success in that endeavor to have a relatively fixed mindset, because I'm going to take something. If I'm
recognizing that it's takeable, first of all, right?
First of all, it's takeable. Yeah.
So that's the map. That's what I'm thinking or the terrain. You might consider that's the terrain.
Yeah.
And then how I be successful and how do I need to behave in order to win in that scenario?
Yeah. And if the president and or dictator, we'll say president, if you're just listening, we're saying president with air quotes, being a really valuable person for that president and helping them out and doing all this stuff, that's probably not going to get you what you want, actually. Like they're not.
In that scenario, yeah.
In that scenario, right?
So the whole the basic sort of Western Silicon Valley notion of I'm just going to try and create value. I'm going to be free with my ideas. I'm going to offer help and assistance. I'm going to make connections.
Yeah.
That probably might not be the right strategy for that
particular. Yeah. Because, but in most things, right? Or I mean, look, if your goal is to become the CEO of a 100-year-old publicly traded company, the fixed mindset is going to get you there more so than the expansive one, right? You got to cover your ass. You have to you have to take credit for things. You have to.
It's a political environment.
Yeah. Any political environment.
How you're perceived is just is at least equally weighed with what specifically you do.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
But then in other environments, that is a strategy for total failure, and those are the more interesting environments. I mean, unless you're like into coups, but like that.
And I'm just reasonably like fixed pie versus like unlimited pie is like one possible paradigm, that one could have about the way that one achieves the way that things work, Yeah. I mean, people try not to use an example related to right now. But I mean, if you like, it's like if you though walk around, as we have this police brutality thing going on now that people, it's big in the news. If you walk around with this idea that the cops are on your side, okay, that the cops are there. When I was in elementary school, we had officer friendly. We'd come to school, be a different guy every year, but they're all officer friendly. And it was like this, brainwashing indoctrination of kids to basically give them a certain territory view of it, of the world. Like this is who this guy is. This is how he interacts with the world. So then when I would encounter them, you could choose to, I would naturally adopt a strategy of being, this guy's on my side.
Yep.
That'd be my default. And so if you walk around the world with that point of view, you're going to experience the world fundamentally differently than if you walk around with the point of view that the police are the biggest gang in town. And by the way, I'm not saying that they aren't the biggest gang in town. I could definitely go on either side of this. They're the biggest gang in town, and they're the mob that's in charge, and they're not good or necessarily bad. They are operating from a utility perspective, and they're doing it's in their best interest. And so you need to be on guard. You need to be more careful.
Yep.
And so I think it just applies to all things. And what you assume about the way that the world works and the way that other people are interacting with the world, then, the way you understand that terrain, then you have to adopt a map that basically for how you can successfully interact with that terrain. And when one of those is wrong, you end up just beating yourself into the wall, your head in the wall. And ultimately, I think it can lead to despair. But my point is, I wonder if the map or the terrain and the strategy, I don't know if it's the right words. You probably have a better word from now that I've been trying to describe it better than those, but I'm thinking of it as strategy and terrain. Mm-hmm. Then it's like, if you have high confidence in those two things, because you have enough intellectual underpinning that those things are true, then that's when your frame is really like, you can't break it. Like it's very, very, the world needs to break in order for your frame to break.
The map. So you have the map or territory strategy, right? And then the approach and
I'm thinking of the strategy as approach.
Yeah. It's interesting because there's a lot of little ones that I think are sort of illustrative of this. So like if you tell yourself before you go into a meeting that everybody there actually loves you and
Perfect example.
They actually already know you and they think you're awesome. You're going to behave in a way that's totally different and vastly more effective, right? Than if you go in being like, okay, let's figure out who likes me and who doesn't. You just assume everyone does. They just have different ways of expressing it, right? Yeah. And so that is a super effective strategy for social situations. In fact, it's sick, but like pretending or acting overly familiar with people will end up bringing them closer to you faster.
Exactly. Yeah. Because it'll mess with their own thinking. They'll be like, I guess we're closer friends than I thought. Because we already. Yeah, exactly. You become friends with people who basically aren't your friends because they're so friendly to you that it feels like, well, clearly we're friends. I guess I just didn't realize it.
Yeah. Well, that's true. Yeah.
It's how strange how that works.
Yeah, it doesn't make any sense. But there's tons of things like that. Right.
And so if you're trying to influence, if you're walking into a room where you're trying to persuade a group of people, you can look at them as people that are, have an oppositional view of you already, and you need to somehow
subdue them. Yeah.
Give the information in just the right way so they understand, so that you can convince them, you can lure them in or whatever, to your point of view. That might be a better strategy if you believe that they're against you fundamentally. But if you believe that they're on your side, and the last thing they want to see happen is you not be successful in the meeting, and you're going to approach it fundamentally differently, and it will work better. So I think that's a great example, of actually how it's the matching of those two things, and they of course affect one another, but the matching of those two things. I mean, you imagine if you're going into a
interrogation,
exactly, and you
so different,
apparently I've never been interviewed by the FBI, but like what they did to Flynn, we're just a conversation. We're just talking. No need for a lawyer here. It's fine.
No, we're all friends here.
That's a scenario. And his strategy did not work in that terrain.
Yep. Exactly. And then and then there's certain points where the table must be broken. And you just
explain what that means. What do you mean by that?
Ah, man, you're the one who taught me it. So let's see how well the lesson's done. Sometimes you're at a position where the person sitting across the table from you in some fashion, right? You can't get them to agree with you through charm or persuasion or reason even. And thus the only option aside from walking away, and this is a strategy for when you can't walk away, is you have to break the table and just say, okay, well then let's just blow this entire thing up and fuck it, we're done. And let's just blow everything, we're going to burn it all to the ground. And most of the time, sometimes they're like, cool, let's do that. And then you have your answer. But most of the time, they're like, well, like, let's not go all the way. So like you can't just adopt this posture of like, everybody's my friend. You can at first, but you can go down some road. Like if you're not willing to punish, then your friendship is meaningless, and like being in your good graces doesn't mean anything because everyone's in your good graces always, right? And so breaking the table is part of that, right? It's
I think of breaking the table is it's like people are stuck in a rut frame. If I trying to apply a frame to this, like you're stuck in a rut. It's not. It's no longer working, and the continuation of every interaction you have is only entrenching positions.
You need a pattern interrupt.
Exactly.
Breaking the table to
pattern interrupt. It basically gets people to think about things. You're fundamentally changing the conversation from maybe from going from the micro to the macro, or going from the arbitrary to the real world. But you're altering the focus of the conversation. And so you make it possible for everybody to continue on with this sort of refreshed mindset in good faith toward working toward an understanding together,
Yep.
Yeah. It's easier to explain with a specific example, but I can't necessarily think of one that wouldn't be personal to people we know.
Yeah.
But anyway, certainly as a management tool, it's something that's really important because sometimes the conversation you reach a point in the conversation where the only way forward causes damage to all parties.
Yep.
So it's like as you step closer, you're basically both walking toward a cliff. And the only way to do it is to get everyone to do a 180 and look the other way. Yep. And realize you're on the same side anyway, and you can start walking back together. So you have to sort of orchestrate this flipping the script completely on things to get people to get everyone to talking about something else or looking at from a totally different point of view.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I'm thinking about, I've one example of breaking the table that is, I don't really talk to the guy anymore, but it was basically, it was a few years ago, and it was in LA. This guy was doing film financing, right? And had a meeting with him to see if there's something we could do together. And like you go in, and he did all the classic Hollywood bullshit, right? So kept me waiting in the office for 15, 20 minutes. He wasn't busy, all that stuff. And you go into his office, right? And his desk is at one height. Yeah. And then all the chairs in the office are like little school chairs that are about 6 inches below. So he's looking down at you. And so he clearly values this, right? This sense of power, this sense of everything else. And so I'm sitting there, I was like, okay, well, we'll see how this goes. And everything I'm saying is wrong. I don't know what I'm talking about. And I was like, the only thing that can potentially salvage this, at least my dignity at the very least, is,
which is worth a lot.
Which is worth something, And so I was like, okay, none of this is working. So I got up and just sat on his desk and came up with an excuse. Be like, okay, let me show you our website. And I come over and sit on his desk, right? And lean around to look at his screen. I'm like, okay, this is what, I'm playing with his monitor. Give me your mouse and everything. And he's just like this because he's got this frame.
Manage the situation to basically to be this, I'm right, you're wrong. You're going to listen. Yeah. This is going to be the deal I want.
Yeah. And it's like, oh, now, but physically, I'm just going to show you that your entire kingdom means nothing to me. Right. And all this set up. And it was like, I'm leaning on his desk, moving. Oh, like, okay, I got to move this keyboard. I'm like touching all his shit. And like, he was just, and then he became pliable. We ended up talking for another hour and a half. Right. And
I think it's a great example, because a lot of times when you think of like breaking the table, it feels like it's an extreme, like dropping a nuke into the relationship or something. It's not. It's altering. Like, he's stuck in his frame where it's like, this is a drill. He does it all day long with different people. They come in, they pitch stuff. He challenges them. He gets in these. It's a strategy, right? He uses for that terrain. And but you could see you were at a total impasse, and that there was literally no productive way forward. So at that point, you could look at it potentially as a Hail Mary, which could end up losing everything. Losing a potential deal that may or may not be there anyway. But really, I think where people, they get stuck in these places and they don't realize that the only chance of a productive way forward is something like that. Like, they delude themselves into thinking they're getting closer to a deal by becoming more compliant with this other person's frame, but you become less and less and less able to maneuver. And you have to shift it. So I think that's a great example of it. I remember you telling me that when you got back. I'm like, good, fuck that guy.
His movie sucked. They didn't make any money either. So, but yeah. So that's like, and the thing is, like, if you're going to break the table, depending on the circumstances, ideally, call it a pattern interrupt, of which breaking the table is one of them, right? The best pattern interrupts are done, in my experience, where they don't know that you're doing a pattern interrupt. So you have some excuse, and then suddenly you have some plausible deniability, right? It's like, I needed to show him something on his computer, and I didn't have my computer with me. Like, if I just went over and sat on his desk, then, that meeting could have gone a totally different way. Right. But it's like, you have an excuse, but then you use that excuse to basically erode his frame.
Right.
It'd be like, now you're in my world, and in my world, I sit and stand where the fuck I want at whatever.
Right. We're both adults, and we're going to talk to each other. We're equals in some other way. Yeah.
So
exactly. I think, a pattern interrupt is a good way to think of it. And the thing is, you just have to be able to recognize when somebody's. So like in this guy's scenario, just going back to the frame thing, his frame, because of his uninformed state, really, he was in a specific pattern. He organized every meeting in this way, and so he had this point of view on stuff. And when you walked in the door, he put you in a box immediately, right? So then he's just using that, and the only way to alter his frame was for him to recognize that you weren't in what the frame, you were not what he thought you were. Sometimes you do that by being really like way more friendly with someone. Sometimes you can be you can achieve it by being disinterested. Sometimes you can be in it by maybe you bring up a mutual connection you have that's a friend that sort of then goes, okay, well, you're one of us then. You're not one of those people. Okay, I get it. There's lots of ways to do it, but if you recognize it, you have to recognize that cliff that you're walking toward with somebody, because their own point of view on the world or yours is so fixed in that moment that it makes it impossible for you guys to work together, because there's at root a misunderstanding of perspectives. And so you have to. Pattern interrupt is a great way around that. I think that's it.
Yeah, well, I think it's one of the few ways, if you encounter someone with a really strong frame that is incompatible with what your desired outcome is, if you don't interrupt their pattern in some way, it's very hard to, because the frame, like in any interaction, right? Like in every moment, someone's frame is getting stronger and someone's frame is getting weaker, right? And so it's like, okay, what? So and it's sort of insidious. It's like an erosion, right? And so the only way you stop that is, like, you can't just like stand there and just keep shoveling the sand back into your sandbox. You have to, like, we're not actually even in a sandbox, we're on a tennis court, right? And like whatever it is, right? And And so I think that, because in those sort of inflection points, like in those moments when you do something like that, then it's like, causes like a reset.
Right. And the thing is all of a sudden it could be, this is what, when you talk about like it's an erosion of a frame, somebody's frame's getting stronger, someone's getting weaker. It's this is not a zero sum thing. So the thing is that, if you're getting dominated because somebody is managing the circumstances to such a degree, like this guy was, that, yours is being dominated and he is unable to see you because of his shit, his frame. He can't see you.
Yep.
Then, the thought is that you should just be more polite. You want to be more compliant, that this is a situation where you should just show some respect or whatever, and I think those things don't work very well at all, because what happens is they end up never actually even seeing you. They end up not noticing you were there, and you have no impact on them at all. And like, whether there are some opportunities that you have when you meet people. You have the opportunity to like in a sale to close a deal, right, through really persuading them that way. And in others, you are simply persuading someone that you are someone. That's it. You know what I mean? And then that can lead to some of the best,
most of the best
relationships I have. They come with that because I see someone as, man, that's an interesting person. I don't agree with them on everything, but they have a, as Mark Forrest says, a point of view, a very clear point of view on stuff, and it's interesting. And if they see me in that same way, then the relationship could evolve to just about anything you can imagine.
Yep. But if it doesn't, then neither of you get the opportunity.
No, and you won't even, exactly. So everyone loses. So the whole thing is you want to be seen, and if you want to influence and not be subject to the whims and influence of others, then you have to have a strong point of view, a strong frame. And that frame the key for it being strong is not false bravado. Although it does take maintenance, and sometimes it can be like false.
No, it definitely could.
Preparation, for a meeting, for instance. Sometimes it really matters if you put on a sports coat. Like, I'm a t-shirt guy, you're a t-shirt guy, but there's sometimes you make it too easy for someone to put you in a box if you're wearing a certain thing. And sometimes wearing a t-shirt is the right thing because it keeps them from putting you in a box.
Exactly. Yeah.
But you want to be seen, and so you want to eliminate the things that are going to make it hard for them to see you. And then you want to make sure that fundamentally that you're, it's the ideas and your point of view fundamentally that are going to make people be impressed by you.
Yep.
And perhaps influenced by you over anything else.
It's true.
All right. Anything else you want to add to the frame conversation?
No, I think that was a good way to end it.